Carol, may we have roll call?
Dale Schleter. Here. Jesse Betzer.
Here.
Tweed Schuman.
Here.
Troy Morgan. James Schlender. Here. Mark Helwig. Here. Thomas Duffy. Here. Bruce Paulson. Here. Susie Taylor. Here. Chuck Van Etten. Here. Dale Olson. Here. Don Pettit.
Here.
Ron Kinsley. Here. Ron Buckholz.
Present.
Helen Dennis.
Okay, let the record indicate we have a quorum. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, Carol, certification of compliance with Opens Meeting Law, please.
This meeting has been noticed to the members of this board, to the public, and to the news media as required by Section 19.84 of the Wisconsin statutes.
Thank you, Carol. Moving on then to number 3, public comment. Is there anyone here who would like to address the board? If so, please come forward to the podium. Alex, is there anybody on virtually? Okay. Okay, moving on into number 4, meeting agenda. We've had a request to move number 22 up in between 5 and 6, so something like 5B.
I would make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Motion by Mr. Olson to approve the agenda.
Second.
As second by Mr. Buckholz. Any further discussion? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving on to number 5, minutes. Previous meeting, County Board, September 17th, 2020. Mr. Duffy?
I move to approve.
Motion by Mr. Duffy to approve as presented. Mr. Helwig, second by Mr. Helwig. Is there any further discussion? If none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, 5B. Appointment, discussion, and possible action. We need to fill a vacancy for District 15 County Board Supervisor. Ms. Helen Dennis is resigning, effective after the meeting tonight. So, interviewed 3 candidates, and I chose Mr. Ed Peters to fill her position as County Board Supervisor, District 15.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Kinsley.
I believe we have to have a vacancy before we can fill it. Is Ms. Dennis done after the meeting?
She is. And Mr. Peters will not start till we swear him in prior to the committee meetings in November. Mr. Schlender?
So, a couple things. One is, I think Ms. Dennis has provided notice that her vacancy is impending. So I think it's within the board chair's duty to begin the vetting process. It's my understanding that the chair makes a recommendation and that decision is ratified by the board. Is that correct?
Correct.
So that would require a vote for replacement on Ms. Dennis. And then the last one is, I'd just like to go on the record and thank Ms. Dennis for her years of service and for her time that she spent on this board. As someone who speaks way too much, she has helped you guys get some of your meetings shorter by reminding me of not speaking as much. And so I'm going to miss her participation on this board. She has said good things about Mr. Peters, and so I'm looking forward to serving with him in this capacity. I'm assuming that his appointments will be the same as Ms. Dennis's appointments in terms of committees.
Yeah, I'll get to that, number 23. Yes, sir. Okay, so this time I'll entertain a motion to approve the appointment of Mr. Ed Peters to fill the District 15 County Board Supervisor position. Mr. Paulson.
I'll move to appoint Ed Peters for District 15.
Ms.
second.
Dennis.
I'll second that.
Okay, I got a motion by Mr. Paulson, second by Ms. Dennis to approve the appointment of Mr. Ed Peters to fill District 15 County Board Supervisor seat. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on into number 6. Proclamation recognizing Officer Richard Welch.
So I asked Mr. Buckholz, as the Vice Chair of Public Safety, to read the proclamation. This proclamation comes from Public Safety, and it's an effort to recognize our law enforcement and the losses that we've suffered over these years. And so, just to help on my voice, I asked Mr. Buckholz to help me out. So, Mr. Buckholz.
Proclamation honoring the life of Richard Charles Welch. Whereas Richard Charles Welch Jr., a lifelong resident of Hayward, Wisconsin, having graduated from Hayward, Wisconsin High School in 1984 and remained an active participant in our community. And whereas Mr. Welch served the county law enforcement community working in dispatch, then later as a jailer and as the program officer for the Sawyer County Sheriff's Department. And whereas Mr. Welch joined and married on December 5th, 1992 to Therese Lynn Sabin with 3 children, Emma, Richard, and James, and his grandson Conrad. And whereas Deputy Welch devoted countless hours of volunteering time coaching boys basketball at the Northern Lights Academy, or watching the world champion Green Bay Packers and the Milwaukee Brewers, or spending time in all of his bowling leagues, in his true passion of spending time with his wife and children. And whereas Richard Charles Welch Jr. passed away on March 31st, 2020, unexpectedly, he is served by his wife Therese, daughters Emma, Mark, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce this right, Kopilov, and sons Richard Charles III and James, his grandson Conrad Kopilov, his parents Richard Sr. and Bonnie Welch, and siblings Ken Ross, Dan and Laura, and his dog Cotton. He is preceded in death by his brother Butch Ross and his sister Diane Seebeck. Now therefore, it is hereby proclaimed that by the Sawyer County Board of Supervisors, Richard Welch Jr.'s contribution to our community and our county is a proud example of our law enforcement community. He is a dedicated man to his family, his friends, his fellow deputies. Be it further proclaimed, Richard Charles Welch Jr. will always be a respected member of our community and the County Board of Supervisors. On behalf of the citizens of the Sawyer County, we mourn with his family during the tragic loss. May he rest in peace. Passed and proved on the 17th day of September 2020.
Mo- Motion by Mr. Schlender to approve the proclamation. Ms. Dennis.
Second.
Second by Ms. Dennis. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Schlender and Mr. Buckholz. And the families, the family here, we sure appreciated Officer Welch. Thank you so much. Okay, moving on then to number 7. Law enforcement contract discussion and possible action. It has been, the contract has been provided. Right, he's here. Mr. Kinsley.
Make a motion to approve as presented.
I got a motion by Mr. Kinsley, second by Mr. Schleter to approve the law enforcement contract as presented. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Okay, moving on then to number 8, COVID-19 update. Ms. Lyons?
Oh, there we go. Okay, good evening, everybody. The Sawyer County update for October 15th, as of today, we are reporting 304 cases that have been positive since the beginning of tracking. We have 56 active in our community right now. We have had 1 death and 14 that have been hospitalized. At this point, we're monitoring 100 people, which means that these are people that we're waiting for test results on, and 5,026 negative have resulted in our community thus far. As of today, the other thing to note is that we had our highest day yesterday on the most cases that have been reported positive. Our previous number was 10, and yesterday we had 11 cases reported to us. Next slide, please. Okay, so our risk level right now in Sawyer County is considered red. We are at 26 cases per 100,000. That leads us to about 4.3 per positive cases per day. We are seeing that occurring on a 7-day average from Harvard Global Health Institute. Next slide, please. When we look at, are you able to hear, can you go to the next slide, please? Or can I do that? I can, thank you. And when we look at the last 2 weeks that ended on 10/13, we are seeing 2 weeks of data, and we're looking at the entire state. Most of the state is in very high status, and the rest of it is in high. Definitely a burden across all communities. We're definitely seeing it start to impact our healthcare systems. Our referring partners that we look to where patients would be sent to would be Ashland, Eau Claire, Duluth, and the Twin Cities. And we're seeing that they are all struggling with surge capacity and being able to take in new cases. So definitely needing to hopefully slow the spread so that we are not as much of a burden on the healthcare system. It is impacting people that are non-COVID as well, as because they are not able to be transferred to areas that we would typically transfer them to when they have higher needs. So, or it might take a little bit longer to get that transfer to go out. This is nothing new. We've talked about this for a long time, how we slow the spread. Again, we need to limit our close contacts. Gathering with friends, if you're going to do so outside, and make sure you continually physically distance, wearing masks, hand washing. And if you're not feeling well, stay home. Things that are going well right now is schools. We're able to keep them open because we are really monitoring staff and students. Not many have had to go out on quarantine or isolation. However, students who are sick are asked to stay home and to get tested. And masking is going very well in the schools. We also have a great testing strategy in our county. The hotline is working well for curbside testing. LCO is also testing about every 2 weeks, and that's open to all people in our communities. And then we are going to start a National Guard testing site starting on October 21st in Winter at the Winter Town Hall. Stop! Sorry. And to keep what our next steps are is to keep our students in school. And we are really working with our local labs to develop on-site testing. Influenza vaccination. If you're able to get out to a pharmacy or to your clinics and influenza vaccination is available, now's the time to get it. We are doing contact tracing. We've hired 4 new limited term employees and they are onboarded and ready to go. We are updating our website daily and Facebook as well daily. Okay, and so that ends the update. If you have any questions, I am here to answer them.
Yes, Mr. Schlender.
Ms. Lyons, who is responsible for the Facebook for the public health department or for the county?
We have a we all contribute, but we do have a person who is volunteering to help make sure those posts go in daily.
Does that fall under your supervisory responsibility, the posting?
Yes,
on Facebook?
it does. Yes, it does. We do have discussions on that.
Okay, Mr. Kinsley?
Ms. Lyons, this is Ron Kinsley. Thank you for the wonderful job you've been doing. You've had your hands full. I think you're handling it well. I do have a question regarding nursing homes.
Sir, can I interrupt you because I cannot hear you?
Ms. Lyons, I think you're doing a wonderful job. This is Supervisor Ron Kinsley. I have a question regarding nursing homes. Nursing homes get a COVID-19 case and they get automatically locked down. These are elderly people that are, in general, just waiting to pass away and they can't see any family members because the place they're in is locked down. Is there anything that could be done with them? Over, please.
We are trying to help them open up. What is happening is when they do get a positive case, that's either a resident or a staff member, they do need to lock down. This is part of their CMS regulations. One of the things that we need to really work on is reducing the spread in our community, and that will help us. We are working on a plan as we move forward. There are things, testing, quick tests that are becoming available that we could potentially use to test visitors before they come in. So that is an active plan that we're working on right now. This is definitely one of the areas of priority. I meet with long-term care facilities every week, and we are all wanting to get them opened up. So definitely agree that this needs to be a priority.
Okay, anything else? All right, thank you,
I
Julia.
have a,
Very well
I'm
done.
sorry, this is Jesse Betcher. I have a question, if I may.
Yes, sir, Mr. Betcher.
Yeah, Ms. Lyons, do you have an estimate of how many people in the county have contracted COVID since February? I know we've had 304 tests positive, but obviously there's been a lot more people who have contracted. What is your estimate on that number?
You know, the research is kind of all over the place on where that would be. It can be anywhere from 3 to 30% more than what we're actually seeing. So I would be happy to go back and look and do some research on that for you and bring that back to the next meeting on what the conjecture is on, based on our case rate, how many positive cases would have been in our community without the testing occurring.
Okay, because just based off your numbers, I mean, you've done a really good job of testing. You're at 32.5% of the county with 5,330 tests, 304 positives. That's a positive rate of 5.7%. So if we take that same number, your number, throughout the whole county, which the population's approximately 16,400, at that rate of 5.7%, then we would have 935 positive cases in the county. Now, the World Health Organization, they estimate, though, that we're at 10%, which would be over 1,600 people in the county. So probably somewhere between that number, 930 and 1,600 would probably be a an accurate guess. So what I'm getting at is we've had over 1,000 people contract the virus in the county, and we're at, unfortunately, we had one death, but it was just one. So I didn't get an A in statistics, but I think that's about 0.1% mortality rate. So I think that's a good news story. So maybe we could share something like that, or on our Facebook page instead of some of the other stuff that was on there recently, or possibly sharing the CDC report. It says 70% of the people who test positive always or almost always wear their mask. So it's just an indicator that maybe the virus isn't quite as deadly as we initially thought, and maybe also that the masks aren't quite as effective as some people have been led to believe. That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Betcher. And thank you, Julia. Okay.
Yeah,
We'll
thank
move
you.
on to, yep. Anything else? We'll move on then to number 9, zoning committee chair report. Mr. Buckholz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The zoning committee will hold its monthly public hearing tomorrow morning at 8:30. Last month, a campground proposal had come before the committee, which at this point has now been formally withdrawn. The committee has also been looking at a few other zoning ordinance amendments, which are going through public hearing process and maybe eventually be presented to the county board. The zoning department is continuing to see above average permits this year based on last year's, which had been good for the department budget. We then have one rezone case for tonight, which I will turn over to Jay unless there's any other questions.
Any questions for the zoning chair? If not, Jay, you want to come up for a rezone we have?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have one rezone case tonight. That's 20-005. Owner James Smiley and Tamika Hollinger. Parcel 032-540-141401, located at 5360 Log Lodge Road, located in the town of Winter. It's 14.68 acres, zoned commercial 1. The request is to rezone the 14.68 acres of commercial 1 to residential 1. This is in order to build a private household. Currently within the commercial 1 zone district, you would not be able to just build a residential house unless there was other type of business or commercial activity also occurring at that property. The owners have no plans of having any type of commercial use on that property. The nearest residential 1 zone district in relation to this property is approximately 2,000 feet away. There are other immediately adjacent parcels to this that are zoned similarly as residential recreational 1 and 2. The town of Winter shows this area as future commercial, but they have no comprehensive plan that shows a large tract land of commercial. Instead, it's more of a scattered development, and there is no other existing commercial development immediately in this area. There were 7 other opinion letters sent out. 5 of those were returned, all with no objections. At the town of Winter board meeting on September 9th, request was approved. At the Sawyer County Public Hearing Committee on September 18th, the zoning committee voted 5-0 with the findings of facts that it would be not damaging to the rights of others or property values, and it would be consistent with the zone districts located nearby.
Thank you, Jay. Mr. Helwig.
Make a motion to approve.
Mr. Paulson.
I'll second.
Okay, I got a motion by Mr. Helwig, second by Mr. Paulson to approve the resolution rezoning case number 20-005. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Mr. Buckholz. Okay, moving on to number 10, Public Safety Chair Report. Mr. Schlender?
Mr. Chairman, the Public Safety Committee met on October 1st. It was a normal meeting, not too much to report. The one thing that was brought to the attention of the committee is that we have now had 11 fatalities, traffic fatalities in the county, which is shatters the previous high and definitely shatters the last year's total, which was 2. The sub-note was the criminal justice coordinating update. We didn't meet for this month. We're in a dire situation with our Criminal Justice Coordinating Council. We have an MOU with the tribe that is going to expire in January, and that without that MOU and the support from the tribe, we're looking at a serious cut in services that we have been providing for the court system and for the legal system. And what's been happening is our previous coordinator had coordinated with the tribe in providing services for bond testing so that people who were being charged out in Sawyer County were giving an alternative to incarceration by receiving treatment through CCS and other, whether there's insurance or whatnot, while being monitored by the Criminal Justice Coordinating Coordinator. And then they could be either out on some kind of bond or they could be on some kind of electronic monitoring. Without the tribe's participation, we anticipate that the jail population will return back to its previous all-time highs of somewhere around 140, 150 incarcerations when the jail population is at, I think the max number is like 98 or 99. And the current population of the jail is headed back out on the, it's around 70 right now, which is a little bit more manageable. It's still predominantly Native American, and so it's my hope that our tribal governing board members who serve on this committee are able to resurrect some type of discussion with the council to secure some support so that this MOU can be renewed. We didn't meet because we're still waiting for feedback from the tribal governing board on this issue, and we still have yet to formalize the contract with Justice Point, which has had meetings with the tribe and with the county, and has come back with a contract proposal, which under its current proposal it pales in comparison to the services that we need, and so the cost for that is going to, of course, be larger than what it was. So that, Mr. Chairman, concludes the public safety report and also concludes the coordinating justice committee update.
Thank you, Mr. Schlender. Mr. Helwig.
Jim, what is the holdup with the MOU?
That's outside of my control. That's with the tribe. You might want to ask our board chair.
Thank you.
It is being addressed, Mr. Helwig, thank you. And the Justice Point budget proposal is in our new budget, Mr. Hoff?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you, Mr. Schlender. Any other questions for Mr. Schlender? Mr. Kinsley?
No.
Okay. All right, then, moving on to number 11. Public Works Committee Chair Report. Mr. Kinsley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Public Works, the Highway Department is trying to finish up putting in culverts today on double N. They're shorthanded. The work doesn't get done as fast as it used to. The Maintenance Department is busy keeping the building clean to keep Cobalt 19 in check in this area, and I think they do a wonderful job. We also have information for the airport. We have a resolution in front of you, or letter A, which is first right of refusal to purchase hangar at Sawyer County Airport, discussion and possible action. The resolution says that Sawyer County has the first chance to receive an airport hangar when someone doesn't want to renew their lease. I don't think we wanted to get into leasing hangars, so we have someone that's interested in it. So the first step of 4 steps, 2 steps tonight and 2 steps next month, is the first right is refusal of Sawyer County wanting to lease the hangar.
Okay, Mr. Schlender.
Motion to approve the resolution as it's presented.
Okay, Mr. Helwig?
Second.
Okay. I got a motion by Mr. Schlender, second by Mr. Helwig, to approve the resolution as presented, waiving our right of first refusal on the hangar lease. Mr. Paulson.
Mr. Kinsley, this is the second, or I guess, 1 and 2 of 4 resolutions that are going to be coming to the committee.
Yes.
Does it make sense to postpone action on these 2 until we can see the whole package?
No. There's certain steps we have to go through. We have to get these first 2 steps so that we can do the next step 3 and 4.
Okay, so then we're on a trust me basis.
Well, you have in front of you is what you have in front of you, my friend.
Okay, Mr. Schleter.
Yeah, initially, I was opposed to this. I thought maybe the county should take advantage of this to perhaps receive more revenue from the airport. Since then, I've thought about it some more, and we don't want to get into that business. That's private business. Let private business be private business, and let the county take care of county business. So I am in favor of passing this. Mr. Kinsley, can I assume that if this is like step 1 and step 2 in a progression, that at any point in time, when step 3 or step 4, we can call a halt?
Absolutely.
Okay, then I'm done.
Mr. Hoff.
Yeah, just to clarify, the four-step process, we've had a lot of discussions with Hayward Aviation on, the activity out there at the airport. And our council talked with their attorney today about the second part of this, the assignment of the hangar lease. Rebecca, can you comment on where we're at with that discussion, just before we go too far on the first part of it here?
Yes, good evening, everyone. As Mr. Kinsley indicated, there's essentially 4 steps that have to be addressed in this transaction. The first one in front of you is the right of first refusal. So the question essentially is, does the county want to waive its right to buy the hangar before anyone else? If you decide yes, the county will waive its right of first refusal and not purchase a hangar. The second step is the assignment of the existing lease that the county has with White Eagle LLC for the hangar. The county has to approve the assignment from White Eagle to Hayward Aviation. Hayward Aviation is the proposed buyer. That is the second resolution you have in front of you. However, we received notice from Hayward Aviation's counsel that Hayward Aviation doesn't want to accept that assignment until they close on the transaction, which makes sense, from a transactional standpoint. From the county standpoint, that's not what, was discussed at Public Works, or what I had discussed with their counsel previously. However, I think in looking at the 4 steps, the county can still move forward. Essentially, what you would be doing is voting on the right of first refusal, step 1, and then essentially combining step 2 and 3, which is the assignment from White Eagle to Hayward Aviation. And then step 3 is doing a lease between the county and Hayward Aviation.
Rebecca, I got one quick question for you or
Yes.
Ron. Does the county currently own any hangars or leases?
I don't believe the county owns any hangars.
No?
We own the terminal building is all we own.
But no hangars, okay.
And the
Right.
hangars are all on the county airport land. So the hangar leases are essentially ground leases, so the hangar owners are renting the ground underneath those hangars.
Okay. All right, well, we have Mr. Paulson.
Just a question on the assignment of the lease. The existing lease calls for something like a little under $1,000 for rent, annual rent. So if we assign this to Hayward Aviation, they would still be obligated to pay the rent.
That's correct.
Okay.
But
There's more to it than that. Go ahead.
yeah, keep in mind that Hayward Aviation's counsel said they do not want that assignment approved tonight because they will not accept the assignment until they close on the transaction, which is going to be the end of the month after you approve the next lease. And the 4th step is the FBO agreement between the county and Hayward Aviation. And I can go into more detail so you get a better picture of the full transaction.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Paulson?
No, it doesn't.
Okay, go
I guess it answers my question, but it occurs to me, if Hayward Aviation is not going to accept this assignment, why would we take action on it this month and wait until we see the full picture next month with all the other lease arrangements between the county and Hayward Aviation.
When does the lease end?
December 1st, I believe.
December 1st.
And Mr. Paulson, you're exactly correct. I would recommend that the board not take action on that second resolution, which is the approval of the assignment, based on what we were told by Hayward Aviation yesterday, that they won't accept that assignment. So why should the board
But
vote
we're
on it?
addressing right now the waiving of the right of first refusal,
Right,
correct?
right. So
So
I'm
we would
talking
still have
step
time
two.
then to go back and negotiate with any assignment of the new lease. We're just waiving our right that we don't want to purchase that.
Correct. That's
Got it.
your first resolution.
If you have a question,
Did you want to go? Yep. I currently have a motion on the floor by Mr. Schlender, second by Mr. Helwig to approve the waiving of the right of first refusal for the hangar lease. Mr. Duffy?
Is the rent annual or monthly?
Currently, it's annual.
Okay, and it's current?
I believe so. That would be a
Okay.
clerk question.
Mr. Helwig?
So we're only going to do the first portion tonight, correct?
That's what's
what
in
I'm
front of us right
understanding.
now.
I didn't realize that before.
I mean, it
That's
only
it.
makes sense to everybody, I believe, right? Okay, thank you.
Correct. Okay, is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. B, we're skipping currently, right, Mr. Kingsley? Rebecca?
Can I make?
Yes.
Go ahead,
Go ahead.
Mr. Kinsey.
Go ahead.
I just want to make one more comment on this, because when we had the discussion at Public Works on this action, which would be the county's approval of the assignment, the county has to approve this assignment between White Eagle and Hayward Aviation in order for their transaction to move forward. That's why it is before you. Again, at Public Works, it was decided that this was the next step, so step 2 out of 4. We just received notice late yesterday afternoon, and I finally got in contact with Hayward Aviation's attorney about 3 o'clock today. And that's when we were notified that they didn't want to do step 2, essentially. So as Mr. Kinsley indicated, this is all kind of brand new news. But again, I think it can work for the county. We're just combining step 2 and step 3. So my apologies that you have this on your agenda when you don't need to act on it, because Hayward Aviation decided to change the steps, which again is okay from the county's perspective. We just didn't know.
Okay, Mr. Paulson.
Mr. Chairman, would it be in order to make a motion to postpone the resolution approving the assignment of the hangar lease until the next board meeting?
I would certainly accept that.
If so, I will make that motion.
We got a motion by Mr. Paulson to postpone the assignment of hangar lease to Hayward Aviation. Mr. Helwig?
I will
I'll
second the
second.
motion.
Okay. Second by Mr. Helwig. We'll go with, okay. Motion by Mr. Paulson, second by Mr. Helwig to postpone the assignment of hangar lease to Hayward Aviation. Is there any further discussion? Yes, sir. Mr. Schlender.
Mr. Kinsley, as Chair of Public Works, what is your position on the proposed motion and the action that's being taken by the board today?
Mr. Kinsley?
I'm thinking. With the new information that we received now, which I did not know about for letter B, that's acceptable to me. Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, Mr. Kinsley, letter C.
Letter C, we have a resolution for the agreement between the county and the city of Hayward regarding Fifth Street and California Avenue project discussed with impossible action. You have the resolution, which states in here sum of $410,000, which is what was talked about prior. So now we have it in front of us. And we also have the agreement, which they presented the agreement to the Public Works on the October meeting. There was a few words we wanted to clear up, and I believe that's been done. Questions, concerns?
Mr. Slender.
Motion to approve the resolution as presented.
Okay, I got a motion by Mr. Slender to approve the resolution as presented. Mr. Van Etten. Second. Second by Mr. Van Etten. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Helwig.
I just have a question, Ron. Did they actually come to the meeting? I wasn't able to make it to the meeting. Did they come and present?
They had no representation there on Wednesday night when we met.
That's a good question, though, Mr. Helwig. Mr. Hoff, was this passed by the city board on Monday evening when they met?
I have not heard. This agreement was drafted by, their attorney and our attorney, and it was brought before them, and I had not heard what their result is. But when Mr. Kinsley and I were there, they did agree to these terms. So we can't assume it, but these are the terms we agreed to.
Mr. Kinsley.
Perhaps we should approve with the contingency that they do approve also. Suggestion?
I am amenable to that.
Mr. Van Etten? Okay, so we'll add the language contingent to this city's approval. Does that work for everybody? Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, thank you, Mr. Kinsley. All right, moving on to number 12, Land, Water, Forest Resource Committee. Mr. Paulson.
Mr. Chairman, before we take action on the land sale, I'd like to say that in addition to the grants that we get for our normal trail maintenance, our ATV snowmobile trails, the Forestry Department was successful in being awarded 5 rehab grants totaling about $380,000. We asked for 5 grants, and we got 5 grants. So hats off to the forestry guys. Then,
Wonderful.
moving on, the land sales, if you recall, we foreclose on properties and then resell those foreclose because of delinquent taxes. We offer to resell those properties to the public. The first 2 schedules show what we had offered for sale. The last schedule, the one on the totaling $200 and some thousand, is the one I would like approval to sell those pieces of property.
Mr. Buckholz.
I make a motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
I'll second that.
Mr. Olson, second by Mr. Olson. So I got a motion by Mr. Buckholz, second by Mr. Olson to approve the 2020 land sale, I'll say bid summary of all the properties, Mr. Paulson.
One last comment. I think we budgeted about $50,000 in revenue for land sales. So with this process, we're about $160,000 ahead of budget.
Perfect. Okay, is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Great news. Thank you, Mr. Paulson. Anything else from Land, Water, sir?
That concludes my report.
Great, thank you. All right, moving on, number 13. Health and Human Services Chair Report. Mr. Schlueter.
Yeah, Health and Human Services had its meeting last Tuesday evening. The primary focus was public comment on the proposed ordinance affecting our Department of Public Health and our Sheriff's Department. There were approximately 40, 50 people in the courtroom. There were more people in the assembly room in the foyer. 40 people wished to speak, 37 spoke against the ordinance, 3 spoke in favor of it. As soon as everybody was done, we resumed the regular business of the Health and Human Services Board, and a motion was made and passed to put this on hold for 2 months and reconsider at that point in time. That's the end of my report.
Okay. Questions, comments for Mr. Schluter? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Schluter, appreciate that. Okay, moving on to number 14, Finance Committee Chair Report. Mr. Paulson.
Thank you. At this month's Finance Committee meeting, our auditors, Clifton Larson Allen, presented a draft of their 2019 audit. And rather than go through each of the pages for you, if you're okay with that, I'd like to just give you a brief summary. The auditor's opinion was a clean opinion, which basically means we have complied with generally accepted accounting principles. That's the best and highest opinion that the auditors give. I'd like to recognize Mr. Keefe and all of the other county accounting people. That's very good. The general fund balance, or what I call is the rainy day fund, decreased by about $26,000. In actuality, our operating revenues and our operating expenses were ahead of budget. They exceeded budget. However, the purchases of the capital items caused us to flip into a $26,000 loss for the general fund. Our unassigned general fund balance is 21% of general fund expenditures. Our policy says we want to keep that in between 20 and 30%. So you can see we're at the very low end of the range. That's not exciting, but it's certainly manageable, particularly since we've approved funding capital expenditures via debt starting this year. The last item is that our debt obligation is 0.9% of the state allowed limit. That gives us a lot of room to fund the second courtroom, and it also gives us a lot of room to fund any additional capital expenditures. Unless anybody has any questions, that would be my report. And if anybody wants hard copies of the executive summary and the audit report, would you let Mike know, please? And that concludes the Finance Committee
Mr.
report.
Paulson, are we 0.9% because we really haven't borrowed a lot of money in the past to balance our budget?
That's correct. I mean, we have.
Because we borrowed money, right, to build the jail and the new ambulance
That was
building?
it, build a jail. We have been, as a county, debt adverse, and this year, because we just had no other options, well, we did have an option, cutting $1 million out of the budget or borrowing to fund capital expenditures, and this board chose to borrow to fund capital expenditures.
Yeah, and the auditors, Clifton Larson Allen, they actually brought that up. That was something that a lot of counties are using now and
Right, that's correct.
using successfully.
Yes, that's correct.
And I'd also like to mention that Clifton Larson Allen also came to our Sawyer County Lacouture Transit meeting that same day and gave us a clean opinion and an excellent audit on that. Mr. Buckholz and I were there. It was a very good report. So we're doing very well. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Paulson in Finance? All right, moving on then to Economic Development, UW Extension, Mr. Schlender.
So I would have to defer to Mr. Morgan, who, I don't know if he's in a condition to report. I was not able to chair the meeting. I did participate. Otherwise, there was nothing of major significance to report, other that we met on October 5th. And if Mr. Morgan has anything to add, I defer to him.
Mr. Morgan, are you good?
Not really, Chair. Sure, as long as you can hear me. Not really anything to add. We did get a great report from Mr. Mike Gardner, Executive Director of the Economic Development Corporation. We went over finances. We also got a report from Ms. Sherry Beckman from HLVCB. Again, it was very positive. Our area has been doing quite well economically during the virus outbreak. Unless Mr. Shiner can think of anything else, we did quickly review some budget items, but that was about it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Morgan, appreciate that effort. Okay, moving on then to number 16, County Administrator's Report, Mr. Hoff.
Thank you. I did put an outline in the packet just to have some talking points. If you'd like to hear anything specifically about any of those topics, I can do that. Otherwise, I'll hit on a couple of the topics here that are still relevant. We're in the middle of our insurance renewals, so our property liability, crime insurance renewals. Mike has been working on those. We've had to wait till the audit came back so that we had accurate numbers so they can give us accurate quotes on that. So we're working through that process. Also on the health insurance side, we did get one bid back up for our health insurance coverage. That's our current carrier, Anthem. We were not able to get any other carriers, even though we did go to market and try and get other carriers interested in our health insurance plans. We did have one other carrier interested, but their rate was much higher than our current rate. So it looks like we'll probably be sticking with our current health insurance provider, and we're still working through some negotiation issues there. Their original quote came in a little bit higher than what we had in the budget, but we have assurance from our consultant that we can get down underneath our budgeted amount. So we should be okay there. Also looking at our HRA and FSA benefit provider and making some changes there. So between all those three different things, we should be okay on health insurance, which is good news. We did receive notification from the Public Service Commission that we were awarded the telecommuter forward certification. This is much like the broadband certification that we received last year, a couple years ago. What that means is that we've worked with the PSC to remove some of the barriers that maybe some broadband providers could do to not only improve broadband in our area, but to entice telecommuters and that kind of activity, economic activity within our county. We did talk about public health ordinance, so that's on hold for a while. COVID-19 is always an ongoing issue, and we're working through that on a daily basis. Perch Lake update, we still are investigating the high water at Perch Lake and hope to be coming back with some results of that investigation within a week or two here. Item number 10, the Second Circuit courtroom update. We'll talk a little bit about how that affects the budget. You know, we did work out that plan with the city, so we will be working out the timing on that activity on vacating Fifth Street in between our buildings here at the county, and also the construction of California Avenue, so that we would be ready to begin construction on the courtroom should the board decide to go in that direction. So good news there. There was also mention of the MOUs that we're working on, not only the MOU with LCO regarding the CJCC, but also Economic Development Corp. We've got an MOU with them that expires at the end of the year, I believe, and also the UW Extension contract and MOU, which we're working with Lori Baltrusis on. So she's been a big help on that, so appreciate that. Justice Point, we have had discussions with them. We're still awaiting final approval, not approval, but final negotiations on how we're going to structure that contract so that we can get moving on those activities that we need to do in that regard. So, and then another reminder, the WCA has been having virtual meetings. The WCA annual meeting has been canceled. That's usually in September, but those meetings, they've got some scheduled on Monday mornings So if you check the WCA website, you can attend those meetings virtually that they have set up. We've got some airport things coming up too. That's just kind of a reminder. There's a boundary survey and some easements that we're working through, and we'll bring those forward as we get those worked out. And of course, the 21 budget, which we'll cover next. Any other topics you want to cover? Or
Yeah, you
get
skipped
explanation
over
on?
payroll personnel location.
Yeah, that's just an internal relocation of an employee that processes the payroll. So we're moving an employee out of one area and into the area more closely supervised by Mike, so that we can kind of coordinate that to make that a little bit more efficient process there.
And legislative priorities?
Yeah, so that's our administrator group. So our northern administrators kind of get together at least once a week or every other week just to talk about legislative priorities. And we do that, you do that as a board when you go down to the WCA conferences and discussions amongst yourselves. But we also, as administrators, talk about some things that we're interested in as far as like levy limits and all the meat of the matter on how some of those calculations are formulated at the legislative level, and trying to work through some of those anomalies that happen there. So having some good discussions on that.
Great. Mr. Helwig?
Mr. Huff, did I read correctly in that agreement for Fifth Street, do we have to complete California prior to starting building or doing our construction?
Yes, and the reason for that is the water main that runs under Fifth Avenue has to be abandoned, and they have to rebuild a new water main that connects that area of town underneath California Avenue. So it's actually the water main that is the issue that would get reconstructed in the California Avenue section. So that's the reason that that needs to be done first, so then we can build on top of what used to be Fifth.
Which I understand that part. The part I don't understand is why we would have to do their road prior to construction on our facility. If we move the main over, okay, that's done, then we start construction. Why we have to do theirs first? I'm just not jiving there, I'm sorry.
Well, the water main and street would be done at the same time. When they dig it up and redo it, that would be one project.
I don't know, I'm sorry, but everybody has talked numerous times, we gotta get this done, we gotta get this done, and now all of a sudden, we're at their mercy again.
Thank you, Mr. Helwig. Mr. Duffy?
What is the status of the Rasmussen lawsuit?
That he filed a lawsuit in federal court, and the federal court said it's not a federal issue. He had to refile in state court if he wanted to pursue, and he has not done that.
Okay.
Now if he does, he'll come here and almost made it out of here.
Very close. One last question, Mr. Hoff. These MOUs, I know you're working on them with the tribe and the county on Udva Extension, EDC, CJCC, and I know that Mr. Keefe has been in touch with our Secretary Treasurer at the tribe, right, regarding these MOUs. Is there a time frame when we're going to get together and get those through? I know Mr. Schlender is anxious to see it for CJCC as well.
I'm here every day.
I know you are.
Yeah, anytime we're ready to get together, we can do that.
All right, great. Okay, well, Mr. Buckholz.
I just want to say, before we get into the budget, can we take a break?
I was just going to say that. All right, 5-minute recess. Okay, we're going back in session. There they come. Thank you, Mr. Paulson. We're just waiting on Mr. Olson, but I think you can start, Mr. Hoff. Okay. Moving on to number 17, County Administrator's 2021 budget. Mr. Hoff.
The moment we've all been waiting for. Thank you. So tonight, as we talk about the budget, and we've talked a lot about these things as we've gone through the process, so there shouldn't be too many things that you haven't heard before, at least conceptually, but we put it all together. And as we talk this evening, this is where we as staff and me as the administrator hand the budget over to the county board. And after this point, the county board can do with it as they may and make decisions that may differ from what's in the budget currently. And that's certainly your prerogative, but we'll kind of talk about what is in the budget right now so that you understand where we're at today. So once we get through today, the budget, as you're going to see it tonight, will be submitted for publication. That's a requirement under the state statutes. So that'll go to the paper on Monday so that it gets distributed next week for the public to see as well. Then the November committee meetings, that'll be your last committee meetings to talk about budget if you are so inclined to do so. You can also have discussion this evening after this presentation and talk about if there's anything you need from committees that you want them to look into further. You certainly have that prerogative as well. So after those committee meetings, then tentatively, we've got the public hearing scheduled for Thursday evening, November 5th. And the reason for that is there needs to be a certain amount of time, and that's 14 days, I believe, in between the date of publication and the date of the public hearing. So that's the soonest that we could do public hearing at this point in time. After that, after hearing public comments, you would also be able to take those comments into consideration and make any changes to the budget you wanted at that time. Or at the November 10th meeting, which is the budget adoption meeting, you can adopt the budget at that point with any other changes that you have contemplated at that time. So you can make motions to change anything along the way as you see fit. So where we're at right now, the county tax rate, the bottom line is what is the tax rate. So this is what's proposed for 2021. The tax rate being $3.321, that's the mill rate, or the rate per thousand. That's an increase of about 4.53% over the previous year. And I put out some history there just so you can see some of the ups and downs that we've had over the years and the general tax rates that we've had. So we'll talk more about why the increase is what it is as we kind of work through the budget here. And I apologize on the screens that we have here, the camera is right over some of the budget numbers, and I'll have to remember that next year so I can strategically place numbers under there. But we talk a lot about levy limits and how that affects how we budget. And so this screen kind of talks about the proposed levy limits and the operating levy, which is the portion of the levy that falls under the levy limit. So that operating levy plus the debt levy is that first section there. And there's a 5.91% increase, mostly due to the proposed debt levy that we'll talk about. And Mr. Paulson alluded to that earlier for those capital items contained within the budget. The special purpose levy, those are the things that fall outside of the levy limit, and those are some of the things that we talked about, like the library aid, the bridge and culverts, and EMS levy. So the total proposed levy, that is the amount of dollars that we're levying as a property tax, increases 5.58% under this scenario. So a little bit more detail on that levy limit calculation. Again, there's a base operating levy, and we get to add to that levy the net new construction. That's the state statute allowment for increases in the levy. So there's a calculation that the state does based on the amount of new construction activity done in Sawyer County, and that calculation yields us an increase of $91,000. And so this is what we talk about every year. We've got that base limit of $10 million, and all the stuff that we need to do as a county, we only get to increase that tax by $91,000 this year, which is what prompts some of the capital that we've historically funded through levy would now be funded through that debt issuance that we'll get into a little bit later. But that debt levy increase, that's the $579,000. That includes the prior jail debt, that includes the Ojibwa debt, and the allotment for the new debt for the capital items in the 21 budget. So below that $10,688,000, that's the special purpose stuff that we just talked about, the library, bridge culvert, and EMS. So again, that proposed levy increase at the bottom, 5.58%, which is an increase of about $655,000 over the previous year. We had some discussion about the library service. Now this is, part of the portion that's in that special outside the levy limit portion of the levy. So all of these library services are outside the levy limit. The Northern Waters Library Service, we had previously, in previous years, considered that not exempt and fell within the levy limit. But we did get interpretations from Sherry at, thank you, at Northern Waters, and confirmed with legal counsel that that is in fact exempt from the levy limits, and so that freed up $23,000 that we put in with the other special purpose levy. So the numbers in the 2021 column signify those libraries that we do fund with county dollars. And that far right column also has the state statute 4312 minimum county payment calculation that is submitted by each of those libraries. So you can see all the lower portion of the screen, the libraries that are outside of the county, they are funded at that minimum county payment. The two libraries considered, in county, the Weiss Library and the Winter Library, we fund at above the minimum payment. And that's what the board has done previously on those as well. So just for your information. So the operating budget adjustments, at the beginning of this process, back in July, we asked departments to submit a budget to administration, and that came in at about $11,780,000. And then throughout the summer, we work with departments to make some changes so that we can get down to our allowable levy limit. And these are some of the changes, or most of the changes here, that got us down into that $10,688,000 that is our levy limit for this year. A couple of things I'll mention here. Some things like reduction in workers' comp premiums. That was due to some of the hard work that we've been doing on watching workers' comp claims and getting people back to work. That's reflected in a lower premium. So, one of the big items on here, and we've talked about this in Health and Human Services, is the amount of money that the county expends on mental health placements, out-of-county placements for mental health issues. And we've got a few people in facilities that are out of state, and those are very costly facilities. And currently, what this line here, the $762,000, represents the amount of money that we don't have in the budget to cover the potential cost of that. We've got over $1 million in fund balance in Health and Human Services. So for this year, part of the budget is using some of that fund balance to fund that overage in the mental health. As we talked before about the legislative priorities, this is certainly one that we talk about not only in our group that goes down to Madison 3 times a year, but we talk about it within our administrator group as well. And this is one of our highest priorities that we need to think about, because this, you know, our cost of $1 million on a $10 million levy for one item is rather significant. So that's one of the issues with this budget that's really concerning, is those mental health costs and how that affects the county and the county levy. On the highway side, we've got a few things going on there. We've got County E Bridge. We've got the $200,000 that we would be funding with fund balance. We did that same thing last year. Highway Commissioner put it back in the budget. We took it back out of the budget to get things balanced. And then the $500,000 shift equipment to debt proceeds. So that's the $500,000 of capital equipment that Highway purchases or plans to purchase in 2021 that would now be funded by debt. So that used to be funded by operating levy. So, you know, and this is the major change, philosophy change that, you know, this county is doing this year, is not funding those things out of operating, but using debt proceeds to fund true capital items. And we've got a list that identifies what those items are. But, you know, that's a significant change for the county and how we are budgeting. Another thing that we talk about considerably, and we talked a lot about this in economic development, some of the things that we fund, funded by operating levy. So the Northern Waters Library Service, that used to be under operating levy. I didn't take it off the screen because it was always under operating levy, but that can come off of this page because now it's outside the operating levy. But everything else in here is funded by levy that is in the operating portion of what we fund. So the Sawyer County Fair, they have a request for $45,000, which is an increase over last year, but part of that increase is a $10,000 allocation. They want to improve some of the buildings out there, and I don't have the list in front of me, but they had a couple of buildings that they wanted to make some improvements on. So I left that in the budget. It is in the budget currently. I suggest if we leave that in the budget, that we work with our maintenance department, Tim Hagberg, to make sure that anything they do to infrastructure out there meets with our satisfaction as well. Senior Resource Center, same as last year. Hayward Lakes Visitors Bureau and Economic Development Corporation. Two items I want to bring out specifically because historically they had been funded by resource development funds, which are funds that accumulated over time due to excess forest revenues. That fund has been more or less depleted. We've talked about this over the last couple of years about the funding of these items and should we fund them, to what level. And if we did that and continue to do that, they should be in the operating levy. So this year they are in the operating levy, being funded by that. So that has been a change from what we have done previously, only because we don't have those other funds anymore to fund those activities. Nemacolin Transit, we've historically given them $150,000. They get matching dollars with that contribution from the feds. And Clean Sweep and ITBEC are also funded as well. So the other portion of our levy that's outside the levy limits is the EMS, the ambulance service that we run. It's a countywide ambulance service, and by statute we can fund a countywide ambulance service outside of the levy limits. To do that, it does cost for operations a little over $1 million each year. We also get patient revenue, of course. We bill clients that use the service, and then the shortfall in what we don't receive from clients to cover expenses is about $1 million. This year, we're not planning on purchasing an ambulance. We had a lot of discussion about that in our ambulance plan. We decided to forego that ambulance purchase this year. We've probably got one more new one that we need to buy, and then we can start refurbishing the chassis that we had purchased previously. So the cost should come down in the future after we get one more ambulance out of the way. And then they've got to purchase some cardiac monitors in 2021. That's a mandate on the change of law that occurred. The ones that we have are obsolete, and so we need to purchase new ones. So we did purchase $25,000 worth last year, and we need to get those others purchased this year. There's a deadline. It's in the spring of '21 to get those replaced with compliant models. So the EMS levy actually decreased a little bit from the prior year, mostly because of not purchasing an ambulance in 2021. In operating then, a major portion of the budget is employee compensation. We are a service industry, obviously run by the fine employees that we have, and we'd like to keep them around, so we do try and give them a cost of living increase each year. We've got in the budget currently a 1.5% increase of the overall grid. That would be effective July 1st of 2021 if approved. That's similar to what we did last year. So we did a 1.5% increase last year as well on July 1st. So even though, a July 1st increase is only 0.75% in the budget, we got to pick up that 0.75 from last year as well. So it does end up to be a 1.5% increase in overall personnel costs for wages. We've got a pay plan, so that's a 1.5% increase. Excuse me, in the overall pay plan. We also move employees through the steps within that pay plan, so we start them at a lower step, and as they gain experience and expertise in their jobs, we move them annually through a step. So they would get a step increase on their anniversary date as we continue that plan as well. All of those extra personnel costs, or increase in personnel costs, are in contingency, and then if the budget is adopted with that increase, then it would get spread to the department. So when you look at the department labor totals, it's the wages as they are now, and they would be updated with any increase that's approved within the budget. Health insurance, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we budgeted originally 8%. Last year, we were significantly above that and really worked to get that down. 8% increase is high as well, especially in this year where no one could really go to the doctor. We still did have some high occurrences of some serious illnesses, and that pushed up our experience. But we are able to get that down, to a 6% with some plan design changes, which we're going to be talking to our carrier Friday or Monday, I forget, but we're working on that. So when I did this, we hadn't received any additional bids. We've confirmed that there are no additional bids, and we're working with the HRA, which is the health reimbursement plan that we have for the high deductible insurance plans that we have.
Do you want us to wait till the end for questions, or can we chime in?
Oh, I was on a roll.
Yeah, I know you were.
Go ahead, if you got a question, please ask.
With health insurance, what is the split employee to employer? What is that percentage? And have you looked at that?
Yeah, so the health insurance premium is about, it's 3.6 or $4 million for the total premium each year, somewhere in that neighborhood. Employees pick up 12% of the premium, depending on what plan they are, single, limited family, or family. So they'll pay 12% of a premium, and the county picks up 88% of the premium. And that's one of the things that we looked at, and that's one of the things that we looked at, especially with the sheriff's union bargaining, and we tried some things there, and we finally settled on leaving that the same, but that's something that we certainly do look at, and I think we will leave it the same for employees too, so that we can keep everything equal between the workers.
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
Yep, thank you. I guess one more, are other counties 8812?
A lot of them are. Some have moved to 15% instead of 12%. And there's some are self-insured and have totally different plans. We're on a high deductible plan with HRA contribution as well. So different across the board, but 8812 has been pretty consistent over time. FTE proposed changes for 2021. There's a half position in the district attorney's office. They were allotted an additional district attorney since last year, so this legal staff would help facilitate that new position. That is a state-funded position. The ADA is, the secretary is a county-funded position. And then there was reductions in the Health and Human Services of 2 positions, which they were able to do some things to keep their budget in line. Again, on the Health and Human Services budget, excuse me, they did a good job. That's a pretty significant budget. They came in relatively even to last year's funding, with the exception of those mental health costs. Those mental health costs really are far and above what the county can afford. And we talked about that in Human Services, $750,000. It's either, we fund that out of fund balance, or we cut $750,000 of Health and Human Services that we can provide to the people in need. So that's, where we've got the budget currently. So this might be a little busy on the screen, but this is the capital improvement plan. As you recall, we set up a 5-year capital improvement plan a few years ago now, which Sawyer County hadn't had previously, but we felt it important to, lay out these high dollar expenditures so that we could more appropriately plan for the bumps in the road, these high dollar ones, as they come and go, that's part of the reasons that we had the ups and downs in the tax rates over the years, is just funding some of these things that were within the levy. A couple of significant things happening here. One is, if you look in the center of the screen, the proceeds from debt issuance facility. There's $2 million in 2021 and $5 million in 2022. That's the current plan if there is a courtroom to be built, and it's just a $7 million placeholder now. We don't have the exact dollar amounts. The best estimate we have currently is a $6 million estimate, which we were working off of, plus another $410,000 to do the street vacation and whatnot. So we're at about a $6.5 million project currently. But for discussion purposes here, what we would do is probably issue debt a little bit in 2021, and that approval would happen as we get more details about what those costs are. So the plan contemplates that there's no debt payment for the courthouse contemplated in the 2021 budget. If that project is approved, and if the debt is approved by county board, then we would issue debt, and repayment, the first repayment of that would be in 2022. So there are still a couple of hurdles that we need to get that project off the ground, but this is how it would look within the plan as we talk about that. What else? Down in the tax levy section, you'll notice operating levy, that there's zeros across there. There used to be capital items funded by operating levy, and now we are using debt for some of those capital items, which I think I have next here. So in 2021, we would be planning on $988,000 worth of capital items that would be funded by debt. Previously, this board authorized the planning of not to exceed 1.1 million for capital items. So as we looked at the capital items and pared that down a bit, we came up with this list of items that would be funded by that debt issue. So this is the debt that would be issued in December of this year and would be repaid over a 2-year schedule. So there'd be a debt repayment in 2021 and a final debt repayment of that in 2022. And this is probably unreadable, but I just want to bring this to your attention. We've talked a little bit more about this in the Finance Committee. What this is, which you can't read, and which is fine because the numbers in this plan have changed slightly, but the point being is that there is a debt plan. So we've got a plan on, now that we have a 5-year capital plan and identified capital items that are going to be purchased over the next 5 years, we are now developing a debt plan as well to mirror what needs to be funded by debt. So it's no longer, a guessing game of ups and downs in the tax rate. We can plan more accordingly on the purchases that are coming up, plan the debt and the debt repayment schedules around those issues so that we can kind of smooth that out and take the bumps out of the road in the tax levy and the tax rate. So even though this is unreadable on the screen, be it known that the Finance Committee does look at this and has been very helpful in determining how this plan should be developed, and we'll continue those discussions each year as we go forward now that we have developed this model to use for that purpose. This kind of gives you a picture. The green line represents the operating levy and the amount of slight increase that we get every year in the operating levy. And the blue portion then signifies the debt levy that we would be incurring in future years. So as we start to lay out the debt plan over the next 5 years, we're trying to make it so that we've got a flattened and not so much the ups and downs in the tax levy and the tax rate. So the plan currently, we've got that 5.58% increase in levy planned for this year, and that's smooth increase over the next couple of years as we incur more debt for capital items. But according to the plan that we've developed, then once we get over that hump of that initial change in philosophy, then that tax rate and levy increase goes back down in year 5, 6, and beyond. This is the schedule of debt service payments. We've got the general obligation refunding bonds. That's the jail that was done in 2012. The ambulance debt, the Ojibwa building, which was the debt issue from 2019. And the capital borrowing that we would do in 2021 would be repaid over 2021 and 22. 2-year repayment schedule, aggressive reschedule there, or repayment schedule. And then the blank column, we would issue debt at some point should the courtroom facility be approved and built relatively soon. And this is back to where we started, the timeline, just again, where we're at and where we're going. And so this was certainly a high-level overview, again, of the budget. You'll be getting budget reports. Mike has got those prepared, and we'll be emailing those out or handed out to you as well for more detail. And as you look at those budgets and come up with questions, you can certainly refer them to me, and we can discuss those in committee meetings coming up next month. You'll certainly have a chance to make any changes as we go along, as we discussed, and we can work with you to make those changes if you have suggestions on anything you want to do different. At this time, too, we can talk about any topic I haven't covered so far, and we can dive into more detail on any topic you would like to.
Mr. Schlender.
Mr. Chairman, according to that schedule, we're having a November 5th meeting. 29th to the 5th is where we're going to have committee meetings. Are we changing the committee schedule?
We're not changing the committee schedule. What changes is the regular November Thursday night board meeting is not a Thursday night, it's the Tuesday night. So that
November 10th.
November 10th meeting is what then moves kind of the committees back a week, I think. So that's why the Public Safety Committee meeting is October 29th.
Second. I got you, Susie.
Proposed 6:30, November 5th.
Okay, Ms. Taylor?
I just have a couple questions. So, can we go to the library page?
Oops, was that it? No.
That's closer to the beginning.
There we go.
Okay, so in 2021, it'll go down for the LCO library? Is that what I'm seeing?
Yes, and that's based on the calculation of circulation that they provide to us. Back in 2019, they had an extra 10,500 capital item that the county funded in addition to the regular circulation calculations. But that's a number based on, that statute 4312. There's a formula based on the circulation, and then we fund 70% of that calculation.
Okay.
So that's the same as all the other libraries below them on this list.
Mhm. And then what is the Northern Waters Library? I don't know what that is.
Well, fortunately, we have a librarian in the room that can explain that.
Sure, yeah. You can help us with that, please?
So Northern Waters Library System, it's hard to talk through this mask, but Northern Waters Library System is actually our system headquarters in Ashland, and they keep us aware of our state requirements by the Department of Public Instruction Division for Libraries, and they provide continuing education that directors need for certification, similar to teachers. And we have meetings every week. They've been invaluable. Well, I've been here 25 years. And this year in particular, they've kept us aware of COVID-19, not so much regulations, but guidelines as far as safety in our libraries. And Sherry, the director of Northern Waters, is actually listening.
Oh, okay.
She could probably speak as well, speak better than I on that. But they are the system headquarters for something like 29 libraries.
Okay. I get it. I just didn't know if it was like a library here that I didn't know about, or.
Nope, they're
Okay.
headquarters.
Yeah, very good. Thank you, Ms. Taylor. So then that meant then that LCO library, we funded some capital projects for them that one year. That's why there was an increase there?
Yes.
Okay. And they didn't request any increase because they didn't see any capital projects that they needed, or?
I think normally they're funded at the same level as, just that minimum required payment. That one year they were given a capital allotment.
Okay. Anyone else? Oh,
So I have a question, looking on this from 2018, 19, 20, and 21, and we have Wisconsin statute 4312 is the minimum county payment. Why is it that the tribes amount fluctuates from 28, 27, 31, 25, but we see no fluctuation between the other libraries? Is there a different funding mechanism that's used?
I don't think so. I think we get their calculation, and that's the amount that needs to be funded by statute.
So the minimum amount that we fund the Weiss Community Library is 200,000, and then the minimum amount that we finance the Winter Public Library is 7173, and then the minimum that we fund the LCO library is 28, 27, 31, 25. Is that correct?
I think I lost your.
So the 4312 minimum county payment, and if we're funding the LCO Ojibwe Community Library at a minimum amount of $28,104 for 2018, $27,947 2019, 31,737 in 2020, and now 25,802 for 2021, how is it that their circulation fluctuates in such a manner that causes a random type of assignment? I mean, there's must be a formula that must be determining their enrollment, and then we don't have a fluctuation between the Weiss Community Library and the Winter Public Library, and then Northern Waters is coming out of the levy altogether. So the circulation for the Hayward Public Library or Weiss Community Library and the Winter Public Library has been consistent for the same period of time as the LCO Library?
No. The years that you're seeing, like for Weiss Library and Winter Library, 18, 19, 20, are the actual amounts that the county funded. The far right column, the minimum payment, is the calculation for this year. Actually, the Winter Library, that number was last year's number. I didn't have this year's number. I think this year's number was only 4,100.
So the minimum number, the minimum requirement for the county for Winter Public Library is $9,000, but we still funded them at $73,000 for last year.
Yes.
And then the minimum requirement for the county is $123,000, and we funded them at $200,000, and that amount for those two libraries has been consistent. So they must have a capital request that comes in above that?
No, that is just a dollar amount that the county has funded. So it's above the minimum.
So the county just gave the money to the library at that amount for these amount of years, and when LCO requested an amount that was above the minimum, it had to be a capital amount, so it had to be justified through a capital expense?
I think that was just, I don't know what that was actually back in 2019, but historically, we've given all of those, in Ojibwa County or Ojibwa LCO Library it's not out of county, but it's, what do you call it?
Tribal.
Yeah, sovereign nation, thank you, yes.
And aren't these requested amounts as well? I mean, they're
Yes.
requested and they're voted on here and there's motions made, and then each
Yes.
year after that, Mr. Schlender, they request that much.
So their
And-
request is at 200,000, and the Winter Library is at 70,000. And then
73, yep.
the LCO Library is allowed to request the minimum county reimbursement?
Well, we normally fund what they request. I think I've seen that in the years that I've been here.
Can I ask a question? So
Oh, yep.
the
Ron, go
Coulter
ahead.
Ojibwe College, the Coulter Ojibwe College is getting 25,802 this year, correct?
That is correct.
That's what's budgeted.
That
yes.
is budgeted, yes.
Okay. So if they came in and asked based on their participation at the library, if they're I guess they got more people through the door, or more people were using the library and it went up, you would and they asked for a increase, would that be in line for the county to up their money if they had better numbers coming in?
Well, if their circulation changes, the formula would change obviously as well. So it's based on a formula that's in statute that calculates the dollar amount that the county must contribute to libraries.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Pettit. Mr. Schleter.
Thanks.
First of all, if I misspeak, please put me back on the right track. I think what's confusing here is for the LCO Ojibwe Library, College Library, they have two silos of money from Sawyer County. One is based upon the number of Sawyer County residents who use that library, not residents of the sovereign nation, but residents out in Sawyer County outside of the sovereign nation. The state requires us to track that usage, and then pay according to the formula that Tom has been talking about. The same thing that happens with the Ladysmith Library. They tell us how many Sawyer County residents use that library, and we use the formula and send a check to Ladysmith. Same thing with the Ashland Library, if Sawyer County residents go up there. The other pot of money is the same pot of money that the other libraries receive. The Winter Library, Weiss Library, LCO Library. And that is totally different from the first silo. The first silo is based on the state formula. The money that the county gives is based upon what we vote to give them. They can make requests, and we can decide to honor those requests, or we can decide to raise them, which has happened in the recent past, or we can decide to lower them. But that's a decision made by the county board. So there is no uniformity from one year to the next. It's pretty much down to what the county can afford and what the county board of supervisors decide to provide them with. I hope, Molly, is that essentially correct?
Yeah, Act 420 is 70% of the amount of circulations that, if we use LCO, OC Library, it's 70% of the cost of them checking out items to people who live outside of the reservation.
Right, right.
Okay, Ms. Dennis. Thank you, Mr. Schluter.
From what I'm hearing here, when I started on the library, a lot of our patrons, not just from Winter or the Village of Winter, Draper, Exlin, Coudray, Ojibwa, they were using libraries outside, such as Ladysmith and Rice Lake. So then the county was paying a lot bigger number to these other libraries because they were using it. So what we did is we got Radisson, Coudray, Ojibwa, Draper, all them included in our library system, which they use now, which saves the county money paying to other libraries for their use. So that's a way to help the county save some money too. If you understand what I'm saying. Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Dennis. Okay, anything else? I guess, Tom, I have a couple questions regarding I'm all about the Sawyer County Fair asking for that increase. And 10,000 is for capital improvements out there at the fairgrounds?
Yes.
Is that right?
Correct.
So why are we borrowing for that then? Why isn't that in the capital funded? Or, am I saying that?
Yeah, well, it's for repairs of buildings, so, is it maintenance? It's not like an additional building, so it's not true capital, so we left it in operating because it's more like maintenance to infrastructure instead of new infrastructure.
Okay. And we're going to fund the Visitor Bureau and Economic Development as we have in the past.
They are in the budget as they are in the past. It's certainly the board's prerogative to fund at whatever level you see fit.
Okay. And then this new contract we signed with law enforcement, is that going to affect the budget at all?
As you looked at the increase in that budget, the law enforcement union settled for 1% January 1, 1% July 1, which hits the budget at 1.5%. Even though it's a 1 and a 1 for half a year, comes out to hitting the budget in 2021 at 1.5%. That's originally what we had planned in the budget for employees, and so that does fit within the budget, and that's the plan for the other employees within the county as well as that 1.5%.
Okay. And these hard numbers here in the capital funded by debt. Remember we were talking with Highway about the county e-bridge and maybe that there was bridge aid through the tribe to help? That 128,000, what if that comes through?
Well, it might come through. So at this point, it's a maybe. So it's funded by debt. And if that funding does come through, then that money would be used to repay the debt. So we get to the same place, but it allows us to make sure that we have funding in place at this point.
Okay. And who looks over these numbers, the like capital funded by debt? You got 17,000 for a forestry UTV. Is that a UTV and a trailer, or just, because that's a lot of money for just a trailer?
Yeah, it's both.
Oh, it's both?
Yeah.
Okay. That's all I had. Okay, any other? Well, excellent job preparing that, Tom and Mike. I'm sure the committees will hammer away at this coming up next. Okay. Moving on then, we have number 18. We have a public hearing. The budget public hearing tentatively set for November 5th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. I'll entertain a motion to approve that extra meeting. Mr. Buckholz?
I'll make that motion to approve it.
Mr. Duffy, second. Got a motion by Mr. Buckholz, second by Mr. Duffy to approve the budget hearing on November 5th, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Hoff?
Sorry. In your board rules, it does specify how you go about doing a special meeting, and I think it's like within 10 days, you've got to have somebody sign to request that, but I think it is important that everyone gets it on their schedule, and you notify, that'll be the date that we notify the public as well, so it's good to get that out there, but there is a process within the board rules to do that as well.
Mr. Slender?
So, and the question is for the county clerk. Is econ scheduled on that day? Is econ, because admin is what?
We're looking,
the 8th,
so-
right?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Kinsley.
Because in November, the reason everything gets moved up is because the board meeting is the second Tuesday of the month. So we have to bump everything up to make it fit the calendar to get to the November 10th date.
For that week, are they set, or are they being reset?
Yes, do you want to know what the dates are?
They're set.
Okay, so public safety is October 29th.
Okay.
Economic development is November 2nd. November 3rd is health and human services.
Can we mute whoever that is?
November 4th is public works and land, water, and forest resources. November 5th is finance, admin, and then the special county board meeting. And then November 10th is the county board meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have a motion on the floor to approve the special budget public hearing meeting on November 5th. Any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Number 19, correspondence reports, discussion only. Ms. Dennis, you wanted to? Anything here, ma'am?
I've already talked at some of my committee meetings. Okay, James. Anyway, this was not an easy decision for me, but sometimes decisions are made for us. But I just wanted to say I've enjoyed being on the county board. I've met a lot of great people, some not so much, but I'm going to be honest. I have some concerns, or one big concern, and I want to express that. Any board member who gets on the county board because they feel they have a vendetta, you're on the wrong board. I've seen this happen, I've heard it, I disagree with it. We have a great board, we have a great administrator who does his job and does it well. And we need to start respecting each other, I think, a little bit more. I congratulate Ed Peters. I think he'll do an excellent job for the board. And I will miss you. Maybe Ed could introduce himself or something. I don't know. No?
Thank you, Ms. Dennis. Mr. Kinsley.
I have a question for Mr. Hall. Did we hear from the Sheriff's Department, the union, did they ratify that agreement?
Yes, they did.
Okay, I appreciate that, Ms. Dennis. It's been an honor to serve with you. We appreciate everything done. Those are big shoes to fill, but I think Mr. Peters. Thank you. Okay, anything else for discussion only before we move on? Mr. Hoff, there's no need for closed session, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So that takes care of 20, 21. We've already done 22. Committee appointments. Okay, I have met with Ms. Dennis, met with Mr. Hoff, and we have selected, of course, as you know, Mr. Ed Peters to fill District 15 seats in Public Works and Public Safety. In admin, I have asked Mr. Tom Duffy to fill Helen's seat in administration. He accepted. And then Helen's Winter Library representative role, I have picked Ron Buckholz to replace Helen in the Winter Library representative. So I would entertain a motion then to approve those committee appointments as presented. Mr. Paulson?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to approve the committee assignments as you discussed.
Motion by Mr. Paulson. Looking for a second. Second by Mr. Schlueter. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Schlender.
So given the fact that we now have different composition of committees, I want to make sure that on the next agenda, the time and date of when public safety meets is put back on the agenda. That has been a question that has been asked before, and given Mr. Peters' new appointment, I think we need to revisit that time. And so, Mr. Hoff, if you could find so that we can get public safety back into the committee week. It was moved a couple of years ago because of the availability of the judge. And since we're almost everyone's virtual now, I think it would be more efficient if public safety were to come back into the group, and if the committee members, since everyone is here, could make an attempt to announce their availability to Mr. Hoff, we can come up with a suitable time that everyone is able to participate.
Thank you. Okay, we got a motion by Mr. Paulson, second by Mr. Schlueter to approve the committee appointments. Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dennis, for all your hard work.